All right. Hey, what's up, everyone? We're gonna be getting started here in just a few minutes. Sorry about the delay. This is my my third actual attempt going live, so I'm going to definitely get moving along here. Um, Still working on some technical bugs because, like I said, this is something new to me, and I'm doing this. So just stick with me real quick. I'm going to do the best I can. Lord willing, as they would say. Um, Sorry, maybe that was too soon. We are going to be kicking things off here on Positively Atheists. Tonight, I'm going to be going through. I'm trying to get used to the technical aspects and trying to do all this at the same time. We'll see how it turns out. So tonight, I'm actually going to be doing a live Q&A. So I'd love to get your questions, comments, thoughts, ideas. If you'd like to join in on the live stream and you want to actually get even on the show and video, please let me know. I'm happy to get you a link and get you set up in there. I'm gonna post a link to the YouTube directly. Let's see here. I'm actually watching over here. Cool. So this is actually so I'm just gonna be sharing this out to some places on YouTube. Love the support. If you want to give me a like, a thumbs up, um, add a comment, that would be greatly appreciated. And also, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Please hit the notification bell so you'll get alerted for all my new videos. It really helps with the algorithm. So I would appreciate that. And if you enjoy the content, please give me a thumbs up. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs up too. It's a lot of fun. It feels good to be positive, doesn't it? I'm gonna post a couple more links here. So today we're gonna be tonight, like I said, I'm gonna be discussing audience questions and answers. So if you want to throw in a question, you want to give me an idea for a topic, you want to even debate, we can do that here on the show tonight. This is an opportunity for you to speak to an atheist who can share with you his perspective, my perspective. Uh, just as a quick disclaimer, I don't represent all atheists. In fact, there is no representation for all atheists. Atheism is a question about a single subject matter, and that is whether or not a person believes in a God. So, really, there's not anything specifically in common between all atheists. I mean, you'll find atheists, and I was surprised by this myself. You'll find atheists from all different walks of life. You'll find atheists who are pro-life, pro-choice, um, gay, straight, conservative, liberal, all types of different walks. In fact, that's actually a big issue in the atheist community, is the segmentation of our community. Because honestly, there's nothing specifically that ties us together. We don't have doctrines, we don't have holy books, we don't have leaders or a hierarchy system that's built directly into being an atheist. An atheist is just simply not believing in a god. So technically, whether you're going to like this or not, some of you were born an atheist, technically speaking. You start off in life as an atheist. When you have a lack of belief in a god is what makes you an atheist, and it has nothing to do with anything else. So it's actually an issue within atheism as a people group, is the lack of real connection based upon the whole concept. So uh let's see here. People are jumping on the live stream. So yeah, and so it's kind of a thing, like, and it's actually makes it very difficult for us as atheists to connect together because we don't have a lot necessarily have a lot in common. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to like atheist social gatherings, and it's just you could tell people just don't. It's hard to even have discussions sometimes because you don't have that. There's no common thread necessarily. You'll have atheists from all different perspectives in the in the same room, and so sometimes conversations get a little chaotic. Organizing becomes very chaotic and tumultuous because you're dealing with all kinds of conflicting beliefs. Because the thing is just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you don't believe in anything. You have some atheists who believe in vaccines. You have some atheists who don't believe in vaccines. You have atheists who believe 9/11 is an inside job. You have other atheists who don't. You have atheists who don't believe we went to the moon. you know, so atheists, and this is kind of a core thing. Atheism in general is discussion about one topic: what you believe about a God. It says nothing, absolutely nothing about anything else. So I say all that to say, I'm just one atheist out here, and these are my perspectives. I don't pretend to represent all atheists. Honestly, there's even a debate amongst atheists about what atheism even means. And I've actually been called out. I've because some people don't agree with the way I use the word atheism, and that just shows you how fragmented it is. So there's actually a healthy discussion about how to overcome that, because atheism, whether many of you like it or not, atheism is growing, right? We know now that the non there's this category called non-religious, or the religious nuns. It's the short term is nuns, Nones. So the thing is that we know that atheism is growing. People who identify as no religious affiliation, or nuns, is not only the largest religious demographic on the planet, but it's actually the fastest growing as well. Um, and that's both in the US and abroad. In fact, in the United States now, those who identify as non-religious, that demographic of people, have actually exceeded every major religion, including Christianity, um, Catholicism, and Islam. So we know that the community is growing. We know there's a lot more people now. These religious nuns, in all fairness, aren't necessarily all quote unquote atheists, right? Many of these people may even be spiritual or have some kind of religious belief systems, but they just don't like the organized religious part of it. Now, I would argue there's a lot more atheists than we realize. Personally, I'm of the persuasion that most people are atheists. Deep down inside, most people uh, are not religious. They don't actually believe in a God. The reason why I say this is because, um, and hopefully my microphone is working. I think it is. If it is, give me a thumbs up in the chat. I would really appreciate it. I'm gonna take off this main screen because I really don't need this point. Let me see here. Okay. Yeah. So most people, I believe most people probably are atheists. Okay. And the reason why I say this is because if you believe, Josh Wayner, thanks for that comment. Appreciate that. Um, the reason why I believe most people are atheists is because I believe most people live their life like they are atheists. So let me put it this way. Let's say you actually believe that there's an invisible being, being that you can't see, that's all powerful, the creator of the universe, your Lord of Lords, your King of Kings, your literal best friend, right? And this person has given you life, and they've given you everything, all the good things in your life. They have offered you salvation through whatever means your particular religious belief has, and they've offered you all these things. This is supposedly the creator of all things, the God of gods, right? Now, if you truly believe that is the case, and then it's going to affect the way you live your life. I don't buy this idea that there are people out there who believe in a God that do bad things, because, like, if you truly believe there's a God, he's watching you at all times, well, it's going to affect your behavior. You're not going to do bad things. It'd be like if you imagine you had a police officer walking around with you 24/7, by your side 24/7, listening to all your conversations, um, seeing all your actions and behaviors, every single thing you did. Okay. Do you think you'd be out there breaking the law? I mean, let's be real here. Would you even be speeding or dropping a piece of trash? I mean, no, you would all of a sudden have to live your life in a certain way because your belief that there's a police officer standing next to you. Well, the reason why I say this is because religious people supposedly believe that there's a God that's with them 24/7, watching their moves, listening to their very thoughts, but yet they do bad things. And to me, I can't see that. I don't see how it's possible to believe in a God, but also do bad things. Um, Now, I could see if maybe you have this belief system that their God is like steps away for a few seconds or whatever. But if you really believe there's a God with you, it's going to affect your behavior. The reason why I say that is because depending on how you define atheist, atheism is on the rise substantially. We know this. We know that now the non-religious demographic is rising up. It's now the largest demographic in the world, and the fastest growing as well, of people who would say, "Hey, I don't have any religious affiliation." And I know that doesn't sound on its face like super impressive, but if you consider where we've come from as a species, that's actually really impressive that people have no religious affiliation. So, or no particular religious affiliation. So the reason why I say all this is because atheism is on the rise, but the problem is it's hard for us to connect together because atheism doesn't have any other real connective tissue. Like we don't have popes, we don't have doctrines, we don't have any of those things. I remember when I first became an atheist, a friend of mine goes, I found out he was an atheist, and he goes, "Hey man, welcome to the club. There's not really any rules, so just have a good time." But it's true, there's not a lot that connects us. And so what the reason why I saw this is because once again, this is just my perspective on things. You may disagree, you may agree with the perspectives. There's no real rules. So there is got a comment offline says okay, let's see here. This is great. I'm gonna get some comments that are not in the chat, that are offline. You can also find me on while I'm working on my socials as well right now. So if you hit me up on social, that's fine too. I'll answer some of those questions as well. Let's see here. I'm gonna make sure you come join up with us in the chat. Let's see here. Yeah, make sure you add those in chat for me. I'd appreciate that if you want to put those on the YouTube chat. Before I get into those questions, I do want to finish what I was saying. So, atheism is very broad. There's people from all different walks of life who are atheists. You have some people who believe in spirits and crystals and all those kinds of things, and still are atheists. I have a friend of mine that same way. Doesn't really believe in any gods, doesn't believe in any of that stuff or afterlife, but believes in like energies and crystals and stuff like that. So, atheism is very broad. So, when I talk here on this, any of my stuff is, you have to remember, there's no official atheist position. So I'm just going to give you my perspective on this. So but I want to hear your questions. Throw your questions out. We can talk about what they are. If you've ever wanted to ask an atheist a question, this is a great time to do that. Judgment free zone, whatever you want to say. If you want to um, challenge me, if you want to debate with me, that's cool too. I'm down for that. Um, but I do want to answer some of the questions as they come in the chat. Now, so this is from one atheist perspective. I want to get back to what I was saying earlier about whether or not people actually believe in a God. Because I think there's a lot. I think honestly, if you really look at it, most people don't believe in a God. They just don't. I don't see how you can do it. It'd be like if you're walking on the street and you see a bus coming. If you believe that bus is real and you believe if you step in the street, it's going to hit you, then by definition, you're not going to step in the street, right? Because your belief prevents you from doing that. Like I said earlier, if you believe that a police officer is standing next to you 24/7, then you will not commit a crime, right? If you know a police officer is standing next to you, you know he's going to he's going to arrest you or give you a ticket for committing a crime. Well, guess what? You're going to be on I think it's P's and Q's. You're going to be on your A game. You're not going to be dropping litter. You won't be doing anything because you feel like there's a cop next to you who could issue you a ticket at any time. Now, take that in the frame of God. If you truly believe there's a God standing next to you at all times, okay, when you're on the toilet, when you're in your car, when you are walking in the woods, when you're whatever. Well, in my opinion, you would never quote unquote sin, right? You would never do that because God is really watching you. So to me, the only way a person who believes believes in a God can sin is a temporary lapse of belief, which means at that moment, if your belief in a God is suspended, even for a few seconds, so you can commit your little sin or whatever, and by definition, you're an atheist for those few seconds. But how can you just be an atheist 1 second and then a non-atheist next second? I think that most people are probably atheists, but many people are just simply in denial about it. You know, um, thanks for the comments. By the way, I love those comments. So Z Legends. By the way, if you want to come on and chat on video, please let me know. I can send you a link and get you connected, and we can actually bring you on screen. We can have an actual discussion. I haven't done it yet, but it sounds like it should be fun. I think I have a pretty good idea for how to do it. So just let me know. Um, so let's get to those. Let's get to those super chats real quick. Um, let's see here. All right. Hopefully you heard that. All right. So that's true, but God is also Z Legends says that's true, but God is also the one who gave us free will. So if you do bad things, you can't blame it on religion. But you but like you said, if people do really believe in religion, they usually don't do anything bad or try to avoid it. I mean, I think you're right, but to me, it's not just avoiding it. Try to avoid it. I want to give that analogy one more time for people who are just coming in. I want you to imagine with me that you have a police officer assigned to you 24/7. Okay. And any crimes you commit can be held against you. So for the rest of your life, you have a police officer assigned to you. You can't and by the way, just to clarify for the analogy, you can't run him. You can't harm him. You can't dismiss. You are going to be watched 24/7. You're under surveillance by the state 24/7. Are you going to commit any crimes? No. It wouldn't even be a matter of trying to avoid the crimes. You're just not going to commit crimes. You would basically any person in their right mind would essentially live a life free of crime. You wouldn't even litter because you have a police officer next to you. But yet, supposedly, people believe that God of gods, Lord of lords, is with them 24/7, but they think that they can just go and do whatever they want to do. It ain't going to happen that way, folks. That's not that can't be the way it works. You know, and the thing is, if you really truly believe that there's a God who's watching you, you're not going to be sin. It's just not going to happen. Um, and I think I mean, if you really think about this, what this really means, by the way, if a person is sinning, if a person is doing bad things, they don't truly believe what they say they believe. And that's the truth. And I knew this when I was a Christian. When I was a Christian, I used to go you know, this was a big struggle because anytime I did mess up, I felt horrible. I felt like I had this lack of belief because the truth was deep down inside, I did have a lack of belief. Let me see if I can find this. Let me get the buzzer real quick. So I did have a lack of belief. So that's pretty much it. So today I'm talking to you about let me see here. I'm gonna try to So today I'm gonna be talking to you about why atheists don't carry a burden of proof. And I want to get your comments, suggestions, thoughts in the chat. I'm happy to get to those. I will address let's see here. I'm gonna address a message I got. It says atheists have nothing to lose if everything just ends in death on this earth. Period. Okay, well, first of all, let me just say this real quick. Um, it says, however, what if they are simply wrong at hell or heaven? What if they end up in hell forever? They can only blame themselves and no others, period. Okay, well, that's not necessarily true. Let's start off with this. Atheists have nothing to lose, and everything just ends at death on this earth, period. All right, well, I hear this a lot. People make it sound like atheists have nothing to lose. I think it's actually the other way around. Look, if this is the only life, first of all, I think it's important to distinguish it. As an atheist, I'm not saying there is no heaven or hell. I'm not saying there are no gods. I'm not saying there's no life after death. I'm not saying there's no supernatural reality, and I'm not saying there's no magic. None of those things. Okay. I'm not saying that for sure. I don't have that information. I don't know anybody who does have that information, and I don't know how you could assess that information, how you can have that information. I mean, because by definition, no one has ever actually died and been able to report to us what life is like after death, not in any way that's actually testable or demonstrable. Now, we have people who claim they have seen things at near death experiences and this kind of stuff, but that's not the same thing as actually being dead reporting back, right? So, nothing, to say that atheists basically have this this perspective that there are no gods um is ridiculous. And actually it's very interesting because I want this I actually put a little slide about why this is. And there's this misconception that atheists somehow have a burden of proof, that atheists are running around telling people there are no gods, there's no heaven, no hell. And that's actually not true at all. um Having a lack of belief is not the same thing as having a certainty of knowledge. And this is comes because and I'm going to get into this in a moment, but I feel like religious people want to put the burden of proof back on atheists because it makes them feel better about their lack of evidence for their position, rather than just admitting, "Hey, I don't have this information." They would rather put the burden of proof on atheists. And this is a power play to basically shift the focus off of their lack of evidence for their position. Z Legends coming in with another comment. Thank you so much for that. And on the day of judgment, we are held accountable for our actions. He said, Legend says. So the thing is this, because I want to get to that in a moment as well. But it's important to know atheists are not telling people there we're atheists are not telling people there is no heaven, there's no hell. It's not saying there are no gods. Okay. What an atheist is someone who lacks belief. Okay. This is not the same thing as making a proposition to the opposite. In mathematics, they call this a negation of x. And I'm gonna get into that moment. Just let me share my screen real quick here. So let me pull it up. Oh, I think I can do this. Okay, perfect. Yeah, forgive me. I'm still kind of getting used to this. So this is why atheists don't carry a burden of proof. And I'm going to finish up. I'm going to continue this question that was presented to me off air about starts off saying that atheists have nothing to lose and that everything ends in this death and period. This is a nihilistic philosophy, which I personally don't subscribe to. And here's what this idea that there is nothing after this life. I think that is a claim that requires proof. And I don't know how you could ever prove that there's nothing after this life. I don't know how you could ever prove that there are no gods and no goddesses or no spirits. I don't see how you could ever demonstrate that to be the case. Yes, you could easily discredit all known religions, but to be able to say there are no gods, that carries with it a burden of proof that I don't think can be met. Even if it were possible to exhaustively search both physically and uh, intellectually the entire cosmos all at the same time, right? And search for a God, and you still didn't come up with a God, that's still not proof that there's no God, because God can, in theory, exist in a position either through um, in a physical reality or in more like a intellectual sense in a space or a place or um, existence in which he can make himself indetectable to certain people. So you never be able to rule out the idea that this God is simply just making himself indetectable to you. So this is why I say atheists don't necessarily have to say there are no gods. It could just be the very well the case atheist doesn't believe in a God. So I mean, technically speaking, we're all born atheists by definition, right? Because babies have no capacity for belief, as far as we can tell. They come into the world with fresh minds. They don't have any belief systems about the world yet. Well, I mean, generally speaking, obviously, the belief in one's existence should qualify, but they don't really have that capacity either, as far as we can tell. So, yeah. So the reason I say this, and this gets back to what I was saying. Atheists don't carry a burden of proof. They don't have, and atheists don't have to put this on themselves either. So a great way to look at this is through, and I heard this analogy from, I think I heard it from the Atheist Experience, Matt Dillahunty. I think the first time I heard this, it was the jelly bean um, analogy. So check this out. So basically, there's essentially a question we're asking here, okay? Which is, I want you to imagine that you have a jar of jelly beans. All right, now this jar of jelly beans could be either even or odd. And you've been to the science fair, to the fall festivals and schools like that, full schools or like whatever. They'll have a jar of jelly beans. They'll say, guess the number of jelly beans and win a prize. Well, let's say we did the same thing, but let's say instead of guessing the exact number, we said, okay, look, if you can guess even or odd, you get one vote. What do you want to guess? Well, this is a great analogy because when it comes to the concept of God, there's either a God exists or a God doesn't exist. So it actually works fairly nice with this analogy. So I want you to imagine now that, so basically there's two camps of people. Um, some people will call them evenists. Evenists believe that there are an even number of jelly beans in the jar. And likewise, an oddist believes that there are odd numbers of jelly beans. You have two different beliefs, conflicting beliefs, evenness versus oddest. Well, the question can be posed, who do you believe? Looking at that jar, who do you believe? Now, most people will just pick a side, say, well, I mean, it looks like it probably could be even. There's no real way to know, right? So we're talking about beliefs here. So the question is, who's right? Do you believe the evenest or do you believe the oddest? Well, an atheist is someone who just says, I don't believe either of you. It's not that I'm saying that either one of you are wrong or right. An atheist just says, I don't believe either side. For fun, you could pick a side, right? But whether or not you believe it's even or odd, that's a whole different thing, right? So this is what atheism is. Atheism is not picking a side. Atheism not necessarily just saying, oh, there's a God or there's not a God, um, or saying there is no God. And you can be an atheist just by simply not believing. I don't believe you when you say there's a God, and I also don't believe you when they say there are no gods. I don't think anybody can have that belief. Now, some people might call me an agnostic for saying this, and I think that that's a mistake, because being agnostic is not answering the question that we're discussing here. Okay, we're discussing belief in a God. And the reason why I say this is because you can be agnostic about anything. You can be agnostic about the Easter Bunny. You can be agnostic about Santa Claus, right? You can be agnostic about whether or not um, whether or not this chair exists, technically speaking. You be agnostic about anything. You can be agnostic about who who won the last election, whatever it is, right? Agnosticism is a question of what your knowledge of your knowledge claim to your belief is. So we have beliefs and then we have knowledge. So and I think I did a little slide on that too. So if we look here, knowledge is a question about what you claim to know. Do you claim to have specific knowledge about your belief? Right. So let's imagine the case of the jelly beans. You have it could be possible that a person could basically use math and geometry and figure out basically the dimensions of that jar and the dimensions of the average jelly bean and come up with a pretty good answer. And so that person would say, well, I am an evenist or an oddist uh, when it comes to my belief, and I am either agnostic or gnostic about it. So let's imagine you were a mathematician um, and you are a calculus professor and all in on all these other categories. Okay, and like you have the ability to recognize the spatial distances and get all the calculations without opening up the jar. You can basically figure out that there are 220 jelly beans or whatever there are in that jar. So you can come back and say, look, I'm an evenist and I am gnostic about that position, that belief, right? So Gnostic means with knowledge. So you have a belief and you claim to have certain knowledge about that. Another way you could be Gnostic, you could be a Gnostic evenist is you could say, well, okay, I know there are 220 jelly beans in this jar because I put the jelly beans in there. So that's a way you could be Gnostic about your belief and the number of jelly beans are in the jar. So this is why when people try to say you have to be atheist or agnostic, they don't understand the terms. Remember, Gnosticism and agnosticism, which are the opposite of each other, these are questions about your claims to knowledge about your belief. Atheism and theism, or in this case, evenism or oddism, um, in this case, for instance, those are questions about what your belief is. So remember, knowledge, whether you're agnostic or gnostic about a particular belief, has everything to do with your claim to knowledge about your belief. While belief is basically what you feel is correct. And you actually don't have to have any claims to knowledge to have a belief. I want you to notice that. You may just look at the jar and just say, you may have a belief. I may believe there are 221 jelly beans. So I'm going to say, you know what? I'm an evenist. I believe in the evenest power of the let's see if I can go back to this. You can say I'm an evenist. I just believe that there are 221 jelly beans in that jar, and you know, uh, that's it. And you may not have any claims to knowledge to that. So this is the reason why I say this is because there are people running around who are trying to make it sound like atheists are all running around saying there are no gods. And that's simply not the case. Remember, whether or not you are Gnostic or agnostic has everything to do with your knowledge claim of that belief. And I know this is a little nuance to get into because you can get bought, and this is a big discussion amongst atheists as well. It's this idea that um, it, there's a lot of discussion about this, and this is another great example of how atheists have a hard time getting together and connecting because atheists are constantly so divided on all kinds of topics, including what it means to be an atheist. That's just not good. So Basically, what yeah, so the reason why I got into that is because, I was asked this question about how atheists have nothing to lose and everything just ends at death on this earth. I think that's a nihilistic position that really, that in my opinion, requires a burden of proof. If you're going to tell me that there is no heaven, there's no hell, if you're going to tell me there's no gods, there's nothing after this life, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to demonstrate that claim. And I don't think it's possible to do it. Um, Z Legends coming in with another great super chat here. Thanks so much for that. I'm loving the questions. Please add those questions in the super chat. I'll get to them as quickly as I can. Um, Before I get into Z Legends, I do want to finish this other off air question that was asked. So, what if they end up in hell forever? Can they can only blame themselves, no others? Period. I'm gonna give that a big L. So, yeah, this idea that okay, so and that don't get two L's. I'm sorry. Um, that's two L's. The reason why that's two L's because first of all, this is basically the classic question of what if you're wrong? And the same question could be asked of you. What if you're wrong? Okay. What if, as Homer Simpson says, you pick the wrong religion and every time you go to church, you're making God angrier and angrier? You know, the thing is, you have to ask yourself a serious question. I got into this in my last live chat, live discussion. You have to ask yourself a very serious question, which is, what are the odds that you just happen to stumble across the right religion? I mean, and I don't mean that facetiously. I mean that seriously. What are the actual odds that you just so happen to be born in the right time, the right place, with the right family, with the right experiences, with the right knowledge, with the right all the right information, with the right book, with the right language, and in all these things, the right IQ, and you what are the odds you just so happen to stumble across the one true religion over the hundreds of thousands of years, or in Christian's case, 8,000 years of human history. I mean, we know that there have been thousands upon thousands of different religions and different twists on those religions. So, what are the odds that you are wrong? I mean, if you really think about this, the, it's basically, even if you pick a religion, is basically guaranteed that you've picked the wrong religion. Okay. So this question could easily be posed right back to you. What if you're wrong? You know, at least if I'm wrong when I get to the pearly gates or whatever God happens to be up there or whatever it is, at least they're gonna look at me and be like, hey, look, we appreciate your honesty, bro. We realize we kind of screwed you on that deal. Um, so I mean, we get it. You don't have to feel bad about it. And in fact, they're gonna be like, "Hey, we appreciate your honesty. Come on in." I mean, wouldn't that be the funniest part about all of this? That what if the atheists are the ones who end up going to heaven because we were the only ones intellectually honest enough to say, "I don't have enough information, so I'm not just going to pick something." You know, that's got a big L on it because honestly, it's silly, and it's silly if you really think about this. Think about how, um and I'm gonna get to those comments in a second. Legend Z, thank you so much for those super chat comments. If you want to chat, feel free to put it in the chat box. I want to answer your questions, your comments, your thoughts on air. And if you want, even if you want to get on camera, let me know. I can send you a link, and I will try to get you on if I can figure it out. But no, but it's like it's just funny to me. It's funny to me to think that there's this God up there who's so intelligent and created the entire universe. He's super omniscient, omnipresent, all knowing, all loving. He exists on all places, all times, at all moments in history. But yet somehow, when you can just basically trick him into thinking that that you really care about the truth. I mean, to me, if you don't care, if you care about the truth, you would choose to withhold belief until such a time that the truth has been clearly demonstrated to you, and it's very clear that it hasn't. I mean, we've got thousands upon different. They say there's more Christian denominations than there are verses in the actual Bible. And that is mind blowing. I want you to think about that. Like it, the level of confusion when it comes around religion is simply unmatched in any aspect of life. I mean, I know they just launched the Dell Web satellite in the space that took almost 30 years of planning. Like, and with basically room for 0 degrees of error in those calculations to make all this happen. I mean, imagine if science had the same track record as religion. All these different religions and all these different perspectives, and nobody can seem to agree on any of it, and no one has any independent way of verifying any of the claims. So, yeah, no, what if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong? And the chances are you probably are, and which means we'll all be going to somebody else's hell together. So we might as well become friends because it looks like we're all in for the same destiny. Unless that God is super intelligent, super cool, and he's like, hey, come on in. I know you tried. You did the best you can. Um, and I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one up, and I'm gonna get over to Legend Z's comments in a second. Um, yeah, it says he goes on to say they can only blame themselves and no others. Okay. I mean, look, here's the real truth. If there's a God out there, he's all powerful, all knowing, all benevolent, you know, omnipresent, all places at all times in history. If this God is out there and he hasn't shown me in any way that actually, where's my Paul on the road to Damascus experience or doubting Thomas experience? If God hasn't done that for me, he either A, doesn't want me to know the truth, or B, he is unable to show me the truth. And in either case, no, that's how is that my fault? So he says they can only blame themselves and no others, and that gets a big ol' L as well. So so Legend Z is jumping in with some comments on the super chat. Appreciate those super chats. I'm going to get in those now. So quick question, Legend says, um, how do you explain predictions from a book, for example, the Quran or what prophet said? Do you know about them or questions? So it goes on to say in the Quran, for example, one that the fingerprints are going to be you, are be held hold you accountable for your actions. Um, two, the iron is not from Earth. Three, universe is expanding. Four, the brain causes you to lie. And five, the pain upon the skin, and so on. I, you know, so when it comes to predictions, um, okay, let me put it this way. Let's say we're sitting down in a restaurant and the waitress comes over to us, and or a waiter or whatever. The server comes to us and takes our order. And I order, um, let's just say I order a steak medium rare. Okay. And lo and behold, 30 minutes later, what do I get on the table? I get a steak medium rare on the table. Now, is that a prediction? Well, on one hand, yes, it was. But does it count as any kind of prophecy or is it any kind of real true prediction? No, because I ordered it that way, right? Um, so we have to set some parameters for what's actually because oftentimes people give examples of things that are predictions or prophecies that frankly just aren't impressive. And for instance, this list here, not super impressive. And here I'll go through why in a moment. But oftentimes this comes up. People say, look, how can the book have these predictions and this kind of stuff? And I say, well, let's talk about what a real true prophecy would be. You know, um, to me, like if something can be accomplished through the hands of people, for instance, uh, I'm gonna say like, okay, let's say a book says at some point um, that in the future people will be able to correct their vision. okay, and from their natural state. Well, okay, that's not super impressive because we understand that we're working on problems as people, right? And so over time, those problems progress and we start figuring out solutions. This is just part of being human. So it's not a very far stretch to think that in the future somebody's be able to figure out a way to fix eyesight, right? That's not super impressive. And on top of that, that's a goal we can actually work towards. So just saying that, or we've had predictions like, oh, one day Israel will become a nation again, or something like that. Is that really a prophecy that's really impressive? I don't think it is because this is something that million, possibly billions of people have read these things in the books, and those things have come to pass. Now, so to me, a prediction can't be something that we can, or a prophecy, a prediction isn't. There's nothing special if it's something that can be accomplished through human hands, essentially, right? Another thing is the prediction and prophecy, in my opinion, and why the example I gave of the server providing the medium rare steak isn't a good example. Another reason why that isn't is because it has to be something that is very specific but not expected. Okay, so and then here's what I mean by this. Like if we know, for instance, that let's say there's a particular spot in the world, and let's say that particular spot, a small meteorite hits that spot every 27 days. If somebody makes a prediction that, hey, in 200 years, a meteor is going to hit this spot at exactly 3 o'clock p.m. In the year 2021, and lo and behold, the little meteor hits that spot. Is that really a prophecy, a prediction? No, because this is sort of to be expected in the example I gave. So, that's also. And then the other thing, I think the reason why the medium rare steak example I gave doesn't work either is because that's a mundane thing. Ordering food and getting the food delivered to you is kind of normal, right? This is like uh, these are things that are this. It's just normal. So I don't know all these examples that's being mentioned here by the Quran as an example, but they fall under the same similar category. So the first one I mentioned is that fingerprints are going to be hold you accountable for your actions. Okay, I mean, you can look at, you know, Christopher Hitchens said best, and I use this in one of my videos. He said basically like, if you believe that the laws of nature have been violated, you must ask yourself one question: what are the odds? Or is it more likely that the laws of nature have been violated in my favor, or that I'm under some misapprehension? So, what we see here is that let's say the Quran somehow predicted the use of fingerprinting as some type of technology to hold you accountable for your actions. Well, could we come up with some natural explanations for why somebody would have wrote that down? Sure. I mean, did they have fingers when they wrote this down? Yes. Could they see their fingers? Yes. Could they see their fingerprints are different than other people's? Yes. So the idea that somebody 2000 years ago would write something about how your fingerprints could be used to help to hold you accountable, that's pretty mundane. That makes sense, right? That doesn't seem there's nothing supernatural about that to me at all. Um, so the next thing is the iron is not from the earth. I'm not sure exactly what that means. You know, uh, this is actually a really good example of how we tend to read our modern experience backwards into these texts. So like we for a long time, a lot of people thought the earth was flat, right? And the Bible seems to kind of have some verses that kind of indicate the earth is round, but also some verses that kind of indicate the earth is flat. It's not super like, there's nothing in there about the actual real shape of the earth, which we know is not round or flat. It's more like an egg shape. Okay. So we know that, but what will happen is as science grows and we actually learn something from science, people tend to apply that new knowledge backwards and say, aha, see, here's a verse that that supports this was the Bible or the Quran predicting this knowledge. Well, first of all, there was really no predictive capabilities there, because even though the book said something, let's say the Quran does say that iron is not from the earth. I don't even know what that means, because I'm pretty sure iron is from the earth, or it comes out actually it comes out from stars. I mean, who knows? And once again, I'm going to ask: is there a perfectly natural explanation for why someone would write something like that in a book 2,000 years ago? Sure, why not? Maybe there was a person who had, maybe society understood uh the metal process and how things are. They understood a certain perspective, or maybe that somebody just wrote it down. They just happened to get it right. Is that possible? Is it possible to write down something about the future and it happened to be correct? You know, I think it is. I know that people for a long time were writing about how we're going to have flying cars, and in the future, back in the 20s, early 1900s even. You know, there if you watch Ancient Aliens, you'll hear about people talking about this stuff thou- tens of thousands of years ago, supposedly, about flying vehicles and this kind of stuff without even any knowledge. Now, were these people writing this because they had some type of insight into the future, that we would have flying vehicles in the future? Uh, did they have some divine revelation? Or is it just possible that people were just using their imaginations and they happened to kind of guess something that could be looked at in the past as something that's meaningful? And if you watch like Ancient Aliens, you'll see this all the time. You can see like ancient hieroglyphics. And yeah, if you like squint your eye and you just kind of like turn your head, you can kind of see that it looks like a little spaceship. But once again, this is us in the 21st century looking back and be like, aha, look, there's proof of aliens in ancient Egypt. And skeptics are like, no, not necessarily. It could just be maybe someone made a toy for their kid or whatever it is. So, this is part of the problem. Looking back, you're taking a level of certainty that I don't think you have the ability to take. Just because the Bible says, or the Quran says something about the future and it happened to be correct, doesn't mean that there was a supernatural cause of that. Now, that would be cool if there were. It would be awesome if we could predict the future using supernatural methods. But once again, I don't see how this is. It says, yes, iron came from stars and now are on Earth. Sure. Okay. So the chances of somebody writing something that could be I mean, let's be real here. What does that really mean? Say iron is not from the earth. I mean, I've heard people use that phrase in a bunch of different ways. Like even let's see, what is something I've heard somebody say? It's very similar. Like, oh, she's not of this earth, or he's not of this earth. Meaning, there's something special about this person, right? Once again, figurative language. You know, there's a lot of, and I'm not saying any one of these explanations are how I could explain this supposed prediction, but I'm just giving you a couple of examples. These are just off the top of my head, sitting here reading it for the first time. I'm just giving you a couple of like just basic, completely natural explanations that don't require supernatural at all. Um, Appreciate that super chat, agnostic theist. I'll be jumping on those in just a moment. So, once again, I'm not telling you I'm not trying to explain all of this for sure. What I'm trying to do is show you that there are perfectly natural, simple explanations for these supposed predictions or prophecies or whatever. Once again, just because you order a medium rare steak and a medium rare steak comes to your table, that's not magical. That's not that there's nothing magical. And just because somebody happened to write something down a couple thousand years ago that happened to eventually be shown somewhat correct, depending on how you squint your eye and turn your head and read the text, that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything mystical or supernatural about that either. So uh, the third thing was the universe expanding. I mean, people have been talking about the state of the universe and the essence of the universe as far back as humans have been able to communicate. Let's be real here. What is space? What is time? They're probably all like doing, eating I was watching this thing on the Joe Rogan experience about the fungal ape theory. They're probably all sitting high in the savannah looking up at stars, trying to figure out what life is. And I'm sure some people, you either have two thoughts on this subject. Either A, the universe is static and dynamic, static, meaning it is what it is, or B, have the opinion that the universe is expanding. Okay. Now, it doesn't strike me as odd at all that someone a couple of thousand years ago thought that the earth was expanding and wrote that down in some book. Supposedly the Quran says that. That's not surprising to me. Once again, why did that? I gave you an example of being in a restaurant ordering the medium rare steak. There's some reasons why that falls as what we call prophecy or prediction, because that's mundane. It's kind of what you expect. And I would expect some people to think the universe is expanding. If you've ever sat around and um, let your mind loose a little bit and had conversations, this topic comes up. So it doesn't strike me as odd at all that this was written in the Quran, if it does. And I'm sure there are other verses you could read, just like in the Bible, that seem to kind of indicate the opposite. And this is the other thing I found that's kind of humorous about a lot of this is if the example I gave about the earth being flat or round. Well, we know it's not either round or flat. It's more like egg shaped. Let's be real here if you want to get technical, but we don't want to get too technical. It's starts hurting feelings and everything. So, but the thing is, what's funny in the perfect example is you can go to the Bible and you can actually see sometimes you'll read like some verses that seem to indicate the earth is flat. Or some people or some of them like indicate the earth is round. I'm gonna also give that one because we know the earth isn't technically round either. It's more like an egg shape. So I mean, that's being technical and I'm being a little facetious here, but at the same time, you see how you could go back and you can find verses that kind of make sense with your current knowledge that was provided to you through a scientific method and apply it back there and say, oh, see, look, these verses seem to support um, my prediction. And here's the other real big important part about this. Before I go in, I don't want to, before I go into much further in this, let's imagine, for instance, you're right. Let's imagine all these were predictions that predicted the future perfectly. And let's take it a step further, actually. Let's imagine that you had a book that had 100% um, that was 100% correct in all of its future predictions. I'm talking about predicted things that could never be predicted. I'm talking about very, very impressive things like think of, like a winning lottery ticket on this date. The winning lottery ticket for the Powerball is going to be blah, 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 blah. Now that would be an impressive prediction. Okay, but let's say you had a book that had 100% accurate predictions like that. Okay. And you could literally open that book up and go, okay, so today's lottery ticket is going to be this. You can run the numbers and 100% certainty you win every time. Now, that would be impressive. Okay. I would agree with you. That would be so impressive. However, is that proof that there's a God? I don't think it is. I mean, even if a book had 100% predictive like consistency for future events, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything else it says is correct. Imagine you had a book that was 100% perfect, but it said something like, oh, and women are also inferior to men or something like that. Um Think about that. Just because a book happens to be right about a bunch of stuff doesn't mean it's right about everything in it. You see that? There's an error in our thinking that we tend to think, oh, hey, this book has a lot of correct information, thereby all of it is correct. Um, no. On to the next question for that, because just because a book has a bunch of correct information doesn't mean all the information is correct. It's really a case by case basis, isn't it? So when somebody brings up the idea that some of these holy books have all these predictions and prophecies that were shown as correct, I first of all, I don't buy it. Second of all, even if they was true, it would say nothing about any of the supernatural claims in it, about there being gods or demons or hells or heavens. I mean, we can't even go over the first part, whether or not it actually has these predictive capabilities. I mean, we see this discussion in Judaism versus Christianity right now. We literally see this. We see that Judaism, you know, Christians will be like, look how Jesus fulfills all these prophecies of the Old Testament. I mean, supposedly the disciples in the early Christians were like, look all these predictions that Jesus fulfilled, and they'll point to all these Old Testament verses, but they forget about that. There's still a whole religion called Judaism that doesn't agree. It's literally their Old Testament, and they're looking at you like, what are you talking about? Like, I personally know people who are Jewish who like know the Old Testament like they're like the back of their hand, especially the Torah. And you'll have Christians trying to argue with them about how Jesus fulfilled all these prophecies, I know Jewish people who are like, "What are you talking about?" I know, they're like they know the Torah like the back of their hand. They're like, and they don't believe the interpretation. So I think this whole thing falls on two fronts. The first front it falls on is these prophecies are not as clear as people want to make them sound like they are. People want to embellish a little bit about what how the prophecy can cross, but the reality is people disagree on this all the time. So to pretend like it's like so clear, it's not even accurate. But the other problem is, even if everyone agreed that we were absolutely true predictions, this says nothing about any of the claims about gods or demons. Um, Legend says, yes, but we didn't have the technology 600 years ago that are now are known to be true. You can't explain it. Guessing is something else, but not when it's in details upon pain is upon. Yeah, like I said, I don't want to be a dead horse on that. I feel like I kind of explained my position on the prophecies and predictions and how those aren't actually good metrics for whether or not anything else is true about it. I mean, I could write down a book. I could begin writing a book right now about future predictions. So I could write a book and call it the Book of Eddie. And in there, I could put a bunch of predictions. I can be like, okay, I predict in 500 years, I can find something that I can predict. I predict that we're going to figure out a way to. I think, oh, hey, look, we're going to find a way to replace body parts using robotics, right? And I can make a bunch of predictions like that are very reasonable predictions. And in 500 years, I bet I could probably have a book that has about 100% accuracy in its predictions. Does that mean that I'm being inspired by a deity? No. Does it mean that anything else I write in this book is going to be true? No. Right? So yeah, I just that's my position on the predictions and this kinds of stuff. I think I've said enough about that. Um, let's see here. I appreciate everyone's comments and input. Agnostic Theist says, "Do we bash Jehovah's Witnesses here?" Sure, why not? Actually, honestly, I'm not really into bashing. But yeah, I mean, I I find all religions to be fascinating, interesting, like how people get into it. But yeah, if you want to have comments about Jehovah's Witnesses, I used to actually be a borderline obsessed with Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. See, when I was a Christian, we were always taught that Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons were parts of cults, were cults. And little did I know, all religions are cult. Ba- Basically, all religions are cults. But it's funny how like we looked at them and like how we basically put them in a certain category. Well, because let's be honest here, Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons tend to have a lot more control over their people as a congregational model. So they do tend to take a lot more control of people. But let's be real here, all religions do this. Every time I left the church, and especially when I became an atheist, I was completely cut off from my social connections, like completely. Like I lost all of my social connections, and it was never like the people were never told, "Hey, you should disassociate with them," which is what does tend to happen in Mormon and Jehovah's Witnesses. Although I have heard some people had said something similar, like, "Oh yeah, you should stay away from him. He's skeptical. He this and that and the other thing." It is true that for like prop mainline evangelical denominations, there isn't like a huge like over the top control over who they connect with, but it definitely happens. So yeah, I used to be obsessed with Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses. I actually used to go uh, to their campuses and actually pass out gospel tracts to them. It's kind of funny. So I actually got kicked off of one of the properties. So sad. Because I was out passing out gospel tracts. I always thought it was funny. I was like, hey, they're always coming to my door, knocking at my door. Let me go do it to them. So I'd go there and witness to them. But yeah, very interesting. The Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormon denominations or faiths are very interesting to me, and how they. One of the things that really interested me in them, especially in Mormonism, was I felt like that the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses, both of them, the people that I interacted with were usually pretty hot. Like their level of intelligence was pretty apparent. Like they and when I say intelligence, I should say knowledge is more specifically. Like I found that Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses knew their Bibles far better than most evangelicals that I associated with, even better than myself. And I was out doing street ministry when I was in the faith. Um, so let's see here. Legend DZ says the problem is you have to drink outside think outside of its centuries. For example, the prophet who the Quran was revealed couldn't either write or read. And for him to know that, well, I mean, I don't understand this whole argument that the somehow a he could never write or read. I don't buy it. I think I don't see how you can hold that position. Look, it may be possible he was illiterate, right? That doesn't mean other people couldn't write or read for him. It doesn't mean that maybe he could read and write. And the truth is, and I know a lot of people, it's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings when they hear me say this, but the truth is, some of the most dishonest and crooked people that have ever lived are religious leaders, and that's the truth. And we know this. How many more scandals do we have to see in religion, in organized religion, before we come to accept this as a society? Some of the most awful people on the planet use religion to propagate their evils. And a lot of times it just comes down to control over sex and power. Um, we know that, and look, I was a minister for about 8 years myself in ministry, and when you're in ministry, you get to see a certain side of it that regular congregants don't get to see. You get to see, you can hear what really gets said, the inside jokes and the power plays and all these kinds of things. I mean, you get to see it. And let's be real here. A lot of people who are in ministry are lazy people, and they're looking for an easy way to make money. And though, I remember when I was in ministry, I actually had a family member uh, make a comment one time. He's like, "When are you going to get a real job?" And that stung me at the time, but it's true. It's true. I mean, think about think about what is being sold, right? You're being sold a product that cannot be tested for the functionality until after you're dead. So you have to pay all this money. You have to commit all your time and all your energy to something that actually can't even be tested for its functionality until you're dead. So to me, it takes a charlatan to push that, and to push it with confidence. It's one thing to say, "Hey, I don't know if any of this is true. That's kind of what I think is the case," right? That's one thing. But people who run religions, we know, can be some of the most maniacal people. I mean, look at the people who are in our country today. I remember Ted Haggard, who used to run a church in Colorado, one of the largest evangelical ministers and pastors. He ran the family, some kind of family coalition for North American religious organization. He was like the biggest pastor. He literally had a direct line to George W. Bush. He was George W. Bush's personal pastor, a minister, official minister, something like this. And I remember I saw an interview with him and Richard Dawkins, and I remember thinking in my head, there's something off about that dude. He's running this huge mega church in Colorado, very successful. Turns out he ended up getting busted for doing, I think it was like cocaine off his male drug dealer prostitute. I mean, just the craziest things. So no, I don't. If somebody says, "Oh, Prophet Muhammad couldn't read or write," I'm sorry. Uh, all my experience tells me that some of those powerful people in religion are some of the most corrupt. And it is what it is. You take that however you want to take it. If I'm not saying, it is what it is. So you look at, listen, if you ever want to have some fun, look at the Mormon stories. Learn about Mormonism and how it came up, how it developed. And the stories in Mormonism are amazing. Like, you get to see the development of a religion from the ground up. You get to see it develop from its infancy. You get to see its like motivation. I mean, it's very obvious from an outside perspective when you look at it, of how it was built, how it was motivated, and all that kind of stuff. And I tend to look at them like, okay, when somebody talks to me about some prophet who could, Joseph Smith, supposedly he he didn't know how to read or write, and he wrote supposedly the scriptures, and he converted them from an ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic to Old English text. And it was so funny because like it literally was copying books from the time, and just stuff like that's just so obvious fraudulent behavior. But people immediately right afterwards, and now just soak it up, and they love to talk about how, oh, Joseph Smith couldn't read or write and all. I don't buy it. I just don't. The whole seer stone and all this kind of stuff. Once again, I always return back to the saying that I think it was Christopher Hitchens said. It's just, if you believe the laws of nature have been violated in your favor, or been violated, you must ask yourself one question: what is more likely, that the laws of nature have been violated indeed in your favor, or that you are under some misapprehension? So if someone tells me, for instance, "Hey, I don't know how to read or write. Look at me, I'm doing this," even if you told me that yourself, I'm sorry, I'm going to assume that I'm under some type of misapprehension, maybe an intentional trick, maybe there's something going on beyond what you just told me. So I don't understand why people just hook, line, and sinker just buy into this idea that all of a sudden, just because someone said it's true, it's true. I'm sorry. I just don't. I'm not. I don't get it. So agnostic theist says bash it. um we have a question from, thank you so much for the super chats. I'm getting to those. You guys are amazing out there. Let's see if I can find that's not what I wanted. Game show. Let's see here. Confirmation. Let me try this one. Trivia game. Oh. Oh, I like that one. Very nice. I don't know if you can hear the sound effects, but um, we have Budani says opinion on free will, predeterminism. God, oh my God, do we have all night to do this? Um, Free will, predeterminism, causality, and the idea of evil. Jesus is the clone of Yahoo, the clone of Krishna and Buddha. um, okay, so I guess I'm gonna get into some talking discussion on um free will. Supposedly, that's a lot. Um, let me see if I can do this in a way that's not going to be too much. Yeah. So basically, the idea. I know a lot of people are curious about this, especially in religion, because we have all been told a certain narrative. When the narrative is that we all have free will, we can do whatever we want, make the decisions we want. And this gets back to a previous point I was making about whether or not people actually believe in a God. I personally don't believe most people who claim they believe in a God actually believe in a God. I think most people are actually atheists. I just think that we are programmed to be um to basically live in denial about this fact. And my evidence for this is quite simple. It's the fact that people who are religious do bad things. Look, you cannot tell me with a straight face that you believe that there is a God with you 24/7 watching everything you do. Okay. But yet you still do bad things. You still hurt people, you still lie, you steal things, you litter, you're using you're using drugs and alcohol, and you're cursing, and you're using bad, and you're telling bad jokes, and you're uh committing genocides, rapes, murders, all these kinds of things. But yet supposedly most people on the planet believe in God. I don't buy it for a second. So the reason why I say this, because this idea of free will to me is on its face already demonstrated not to be the case. Like I the reality is we can't prove either way if free will exists or if the universe is wholly determined. Um but to me, like, the universe appears to be determined. Everything seems to follow a logical path, and everything seems to follow a logical step-by-step progression. In decisions we make today are affected by things that happen to us leading up to this moment. So the idea that free will doesn't exist, I don't even see why that even bothers people. Because by definition, a reality in which free will exists and a reality in which free will doesn't exist, those two realities are identical. They both look the same, they both sound the same, and there's no way to tell the difference. I mean, I personally believe that that I personally believe that that everything has a explanation, that basically, yeah. So like, I just I don't see any problems with the idea of free will not existing. In fact, when when I started opening my mind up to the idea that free will doesn't exist and that the universe is deterministic, I had to come to the realization to accept the fact that if that's the case, then our actions are directly impacted by our biology and by our experiences. Which, if you come to accept that as even a possibility, then it opens your mind up to a lot of different social um ideas to allow you to expand your mind to more like probably liberal thinking, in the sense of social equality, wealth equality, distribution, those kinds of things. Because if you accept the fact that our actions are directly a result of our experiences in biology, well then, if you want to make the world a better place, then we have to basically raise people's experiences and raise people's biology. If you help people become better biologically through medicine, through healthcare, this kind of stuff, and you help people with their experiences, you lower crime, you increase education. Well, that directly results in a better society that progressively gets better. So I will say, if anything, this concept of free will not existing has actually increased my awareness of social issues, of this kind of stuff. Now, there's balance to be had in this discussion. And this is where a lot of people get upset about free will. It's not that we're saying free will doesn't is people like to, like, oh, if there's no free will, then people aren't responsible for the decisions. Well, maybe, but it still doesn't affect the fact that I have a house that I want to protect, or have a vehicle that I want to protect. You know what? Whether, like I said before, whether or not the universe is determined or not, it doesn't really matter, because the two realities look identical. Uh, you know, so, but I will say this too, like, um, you know, it really does. It makes a lot of sense that the universe is determined, um, and that free will doesn't exist. Now, I will say this: there is an argument out there that religious people and theists want to bring up, is this idea, and I've heard William Lane Craig do this argument, this idea um, that somehow, if objective moral values exist, somehow that necessitates the existence of God. And I actually did a whole video on this where I flipped that argument on its head. I think that if a God exists, then objective moral values can't exist by definition. And I know that's kind of like shocking for people, because they're like, wait a minute, I've always been told the exact opposite. I've always been told you have to have a God to have objective moral values. No, we're gonna give that a big L, because here's the thing. Object Think of an objective fact. An objective fact. Whatever that objective fact is. Let's go down to the most bare basic objective position. An object A exists, or object A doesn't exist. Let's just, whatever you want to call it. There's only two positions. Either the object exists or the object doesn't exist. And now that's, whether or not the object exists is an objective fact, an objective reality. It doesn't matter upon my opinion on it. It doesn't matter about my thinking about it, or yours. It doesn't change. And, I think I wanted to use the 2 + 2 example, but I've heard that there's a way to do 2 + 2 that doesn't equal 4, but let's just go with it anyways. Another great example is 2 + 2, or let's just do 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 = 4 is an objective, factual concept, right? And then it's objective, because the statement 2 + 2 = 4 is either true or false, independent of your thinking about it, independent of your opinion. It doesn't matter if you think 2 + 2 = 5. It doesn't matter what you think. That's what makes it objective. So if we're going to talk about objective moral values, what does that mean? That means that this is a concept, that there are moral values that are independent of a mind, or a mental state, or your thinking, or my thinking, or another person's thinking. Well, if you put in the idea that there is a God, God, by definition, is the originator of all things, the creator of all things. All things come from the mind of God, essentially, or the essence of God. Well, if that's true, if there's a God, then by definition, you can't have objective moral values. Those, whatever moral values would exist under such a circumstance, would be directly related to the mind of that God. That God would be the originator and the source of those values, and thereby those values are no longer objective by definition. They are, by definition, subjective. They are subjective to the mind of God. So, ironically, the whole argument of the existence of God actually undermines theists' own position, which is, hey, you got to have a God to explain objective moral values. And that gets it. And I'm sorry, that gets a big L, because you have just undermined your entire argument. If there is a God, then objective moral values can't exist. They would be subjective by definition, right? Now, Con- Conversely, if a God doesn't exist, then objective moral values technically could exist. So for all of you out there who are looking for a way to defend objective moral values, introducing a God doesn't do that for you. It actually undermines your argument. The only way objective moral values could exist is in a reality in which a God doesn't exist. I mean, think about it, put it this way. There could, and I did this on another video, but there could be, let's imagine that there could be, maybe there's some kind of physical attribute in the universe that produces objective, or that produces moral values. Maybe it's some type of matter or something like that. I'm not giving you an idea of what it could be, but I'm giving you an idea of just thinking out of the box. Let's imagine in the universe there exists some type of system that generates moral values. Well, in that case, technically that would be an objective moral value, because that's a moral value that exists independent of minds, independent of your thoughts, independent of my thoughts. Um, that would be technically an objective moral value. And in the case that a God doesn't exist, that's the only case you could have objective moral values. Everything else would be subjective. So as soon as you say that a moral value is dependent on the mind of some being or some entity or some person or some thinking agent, you have now removed the possibility for that to be objective anymore. It's all subjective. And this gets into some interesting discussions on what is objectively moral. If you have a God, if a God just tells you that, hey, tomorrow, this is a whole argument that got put towards William Lane Craig multiple times. If a God just says, hey, today, um, you know, murder is okay. Well, technically that'll be okay. I mean, we see that in the Old Testament and other places in the Bible and the Quran, other holy books that seem to all of a sudden um, conveniently allow for the harm of other people, right? Where normally it's no, hurting somebody is bad. It's okay. You can hurt them because of X, Y, and Z. Oh, he's not a believer. You can hurt him. Oh, he believes in a different God. You can hurt him. Right. So this is the problem when you interject, and this is actually completely supporting my argument that objective moral values can't exist with a God as part of the equation. Because, and this is a great example, if there's a God, you could just simply change what those objective moral values are. The God could change those up at any time. You could be like, hey, yesterday it was wrong to hurt this person, but now they're not a believer, so you can go and hurt them. And now a God can basically change the moral values. So I don't know if that answered your question totally, but yeah. So thanks for those super chats, everybody. I see them coming in. I'm trying to get to them as I can. So I'm seeing here we have some discussion. Z Legend says the problem with the other books are that they got changed after time. That's why the Quran is still 100% the same since it was revealed. That's why it's the fastest religion too, and I recommend you reading it. Let's. So I hear this argument a lot that the Quran's 100% accurate. I mean, this is obviously not true. I mean, you have people who have legitimate criticisms of the Quran and the things it says in it, right? Now, you may not believe those things, but the fact is, there are people who disagree with you. There are people who say that's not true, right? You have Christians who say the same thing. The Bible is 100% accurate, right? Oh, it's flawless. This is where I come from, Christianity is the primary religion. And you have Christians who say the exact same things. Oh, the Quran is the only book that has 100% true. Mormons will say the same things, except for Mormons say, hey, not only is the Bible 100% accurate, but the Book of Mormon and the Pearl of Great Price, two other books, are also completely accurate. So, but yeah, you'll have people who disagree with them. And this is the funny part about it. Everybody seems to think that their book is 100% accurate, and they completely don't ignore the fact that other people disagree with them. And this is actually one of my biggest beefs with religion. Is religion steals from us the most valuable thing that we have, in my mind, as humans, and that's called empathy. The ability for you to put yourself in someone else's shoes and see life from their perspective, right? When I was a Christian, I'll be honest with you, and I would never have said this, but the truth is, I always felt like other people from other religions were kind of joking. Like, they weren't seriously, they didn't like, when I met Muslims, I was like, in somewhere in my head, I always thought to myself, they didn't really believe that. Like, I think, sure, they say they believe it. There's no way they actually believe that. I thought about the Mormons. I'd say there's no way they really truly believe that. They're too smart for that, I would say. But the truth is, you sit here and say the Quran is 100% true. A Christian says the Bible is 100% true. A Mormon says the Pearl of Great Price and Doctrine and Covenants are 100% accurate, right, and true. The Catholic Church has their own books, and they say those are 100% true. Well, I got bad news for all of you. All those books can't all be 100% true because all of them have information that conflicts with each other. So at least one of there can only be one book, if that's our only options, that can be true. But none of you can agree on which one is true. All of you disagree. So when this is called the outsider test of faith, you can actually step back and you can actually, let me go ahead and give that a big L real quick. That's a big L because you're all trying to say that you have the correct path, and this is the easiest rub on religion in general is you're all sitting around talking about how you're all 100% right, that your path is the one true path and all this kind of stuff, right? But you got other people around you who are saying the exact same thing. They're saying, no, I'm right and you're wrong. Now, as an atheist, I'm sitting back just saying, no, I'm sitting here saying, well, I'm sorry, guys. I'm having a hard time as an independent observer knowing which one of you is correct because you can't all be correct. Now, one of the cool thing is you could all be wrong. That's actually possible. It could be possible that you're all wrong, right? So no, I don't buy the 100% claim that's 100% accurate. And even if it were, this gets back to legend. This goes out to legend. This goes back to something I said previously. Even if it were true that the Quran or the Bible or whatever holy book you have, even if it were true that it were 100% factual in all of its, if that were 100% accurate in all of its factual claims, that would say absolutely nothing about anything else in the book. You could have a book, let's say it has 100 sentences, and 99% of the sentences are filled with factual claims, and all of those were proven to be accurate. But one sentence, that doesn't mean that other sentence is absolutely going to be accurate as well. This is the problem that we have. People tend to say, oh, I've got a book here. It's very factually accurate. So everything in the book must be accurate. And that's clearly a fallacy. I mean, if you can't see the fallacious reasoning in that, I don't know how to help you. Truth is not just a summary of parts of a book. Oh, because this book has a bunch of true stuff in it, then everything is true. That's not the way it works. Every claim is assessed on it by itself, right? Imagine you had a book that says that everything is, like I said before earlier, I could write a book right now, and that book could contain 100% accurate statements, factual claims, right? I could even predict things in the future. I could tell you, give you predictions like, hey, I predict that there's going to be a thunderstorm in South America in 20 years. Prediction, right? I can have a whole book of these predictions. But just because I get a bunch of stuff right or accurate does not mean at all that everything else in that book is accurate, right? So no, and this is what gets smuggled in a lot of times with these claims. Oh, the Quran is 100% accurate. No, first of all, it's not. Second, it's just simply not. And it can't. And I've already demonstrated that it can't be because, like I said, Christians, Muslims, Jews, uh, all these every other religion, you all claim to have the 100% truth, but y'all can't agree with each other, and the conflicts are irreconcilable, and that's just how it is. So you gotta figure out something else. You don't come here talking about the Quran is 100% true, and then like I said, that doesn't really matter because that even if it were 100% true with all the factual claims, that says nothing at all about whether or not there's a God, whether or not any of the supernatural claims are accurate. None of that, So, and this kind of borderlines on an error, a common error that a lot of people have, which is the correlation versus causality uh, fallacies. We tend to think that because two things happen simultaneously, that one must cause the other. So in this case, Legend Z and a lot of other people will say, well, uh, you know, obviously this book has a lot of factual information, thereby it must be all the stuff about God in it must also be true. And I say, no, no, that's not true at all. It could be very well possible that whoever wrote this book was really smart, or they just happen to be very lucky. That's not impossible. All the claims have to be assessed independently, and any claims about religion, theology, or gods, or supernatural things, those have to be dealt with independently as well. Just saying, well, because the book got a bunch of stuff right, that thereby there's a God, and you should worship him. Nah, we're gonna give that a big L. So I know it's gonna hurt some of your feelings out there, but I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. But it's just how it is. Expose JW. Yes. Expose it. I don't know much about the JW popes and how that works. I that's a whole different thing. I'd be interested in doing a whole episode on that. Uh, you know, it's all the same. It's all the same in different religions. They all have the same kind of same thing. It's I actually did a video on my channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Really appreciate that. It would help me out a lot. Give this video a thumbs up, show some love. But no, but yeah, basically I did a video on, I think it was the 5 things your pastor or priest doesn't want you to know. And guys, I'm telling you right now, people who are religious leaders are some of the most crooked people that you will ever meet. And I this is the facts. Okay. And if you really think about this, think about it from this perspective. If you don't believe me, just consider this. They are selling you a product, okay, that they are guaranteeing to be accurate and to be true, that they themselves have not been able to test. They haven't been able to test it because the only way you can test these religious claims, the theological ones, is when you are dead. And I'm not talking about near death experience either. I'm talking about dead. When you are dead, we have never had a dead person come back and be able to talk to us in a way that is demonstrable. And that is a fact. I know I hurt some of your feelings to hear that, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a big L because honestly, I don't care about your feelings in the show. I'm not, and it's not like that. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but you're going to get your feelings hurt sometimes. Uh, Listen, they are selling, you have to understand, these people are selling you a product that they literally have never tested, but they're selling it to you as if they have. And to me, this is dishonest. This is why I say people who are in religious positions of ministry, they are some of the most crooked people on the planet. And I don't see any problem at all with applying that to the founders of these religions. These people are intentionally taking advantage of you. Many of them don't even believe the stuff that they're telling you. And this is what I say, you should go watch that video I put out, which is the things that your pastor does not want you to know, or your priest. Um, these and they're crooked. I used to work in monasteries. I used to do it, oh, and I'm telling you right now, if you haven't seen it, if you don't see it yourself, be aware. They are some of those crooked people. Don't trust your kids in those situations. Don't put your kids out there alone with these priests and these ministers and these religious leaders. They are using positions of power and authority to manipulate and take advantage of people. Look what's going on with Joel Osteen right now. You know, some contractor found, I think, $600,000 in the bathroom walls at the church, just gone missing. Like, do you not see how corrupt and crazy this is? Like, it, but don't worry. That doesn't apply to people from 2,000 years ago. Those guys were all different, right? They're all different because they were fishermen, and yeah, that was really loud. Yeah, don't worry. It just that doesn't apply to those guys. Doesn't apply to them. And I just give that a big L, because that's just, I'm gonna do it one more time for fun. Um, Budan Budani says Krishna lived before Abraham and most biblical characters. Buddha was born in the 6th century BCE and mentions Krishna lived before him in the Greek historian. Okay. And yeah, I mean, I think it's hilarious. And I said this before in one of my videos, is like, what I find is the most hilarious about all of this is that God could just settle all this really easily for us, right? I mean, why doesn't God have a YouTube channel? You know what I'm saying? Why can't he just get on the live stream and just live stream it up for us? I mean, it's really not that complicated. If I can figure it out, I would imagine God could figure it out too. It doesn't seem to be happening, and I wouldn't want you to hold your breath. So it's just funny how, like, God's chosen method of communication with us is probably the absolute worst possible method of communication. Word of mouth, secondhand testimony, you know, ancient writings uh that are written so broadly they can be interpreted pretty much any way you want to interpret them. Like this, it's the worst possible way to communicate. Where's God's YouTube channel? You know what's been really cool is if the internet turned on and all of a sudden God's YouTube channel is already there. Just sitting here, just to clarify for all of us, But that's not the way it works. It isn't. It's not the way it works. So, like, I don't know, like, to me, like, I ask myself, okay, so you can look at life in this way. You could put, when it comes to information, you can be like, okay, there's a sliding scale of importance. There are things that are not very important at all on this side, and then there are things that are critically important over here on this side, right? So, like, think about, like, okay, should I eat arsenic, or should I eat a carrot, or apple? Okay, well, that's a pretty important question. So you need some clarification. There's other things that are not so important, like, think of, like, what's something that's not very important? Oh, what am I going to do with this paper clip? Okay. Not a very important question, right? So that's not super, it's paper clip. And then there are questions somewhere in the middle. So I look at, for instance, something like speed limit signs. Like, on the road outside my house, I know that speed limit on that road is 35 miles per hour. Okay. I know that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, whether or not that speed limit, whether or not I know that information isn't critically important, is it? Now, it is somewhat important, but it's a small road. And you're not going to go 100 miles per hour on that road anyways. So I would categorize that on the scale like somewhere over here. Not quite the most important thing, but something slightly important, maybe in the middle. What I find hilarious is that our governments, as inept as they are, as incompetent as our governments are, have figured out a way to relay that information to me with 100% accuracy. They can relay that. That information is so obvious and clear that you're never going to have a debate over whether or not the speed limit is 35 on that road. Now, some people may disagree whether or not it should be 35 or 45, but you're never going to have a disagreement as to whether or not it is currently a certain 35 miles per hour. There's never going to be a debate. There's never going to be a show like this debating the existence of the 35 miles per hour on this road, right? That's how clear they've been able to relay this information to us. But over here, we have the most important question of life, which is there a God? Who is the God? And how do you achieve eternal life or eternal happiness or however you want to put that? Or what's the meaning of life, right? These are the most important questions possible, but yet we have the absolute worst methods to find that information out. We have word of mouth. We have writings from thousands of years ago, lost in time, right? We have personal opinion and conjecture. These are the methods that these gods supposedly decided to use to relay this information to us from a time where science didn't exist, where um, uh, critical critical investigative analysis didn't exist. We couldn't preserve any information. Data can preserve any actual. We can't interview any of those people. We can't talk to them. We just have to believe what we've been told. That's basically what religion has told you. And I find that hilarious. Like, this God is so inept. He has to be the absolute worst communicator on the planet. I mean, like, for real, like, can you imagine a worse method of communication? Like I said, God could come on right now and just start his own YouTube channel. Like, and at least that would be decent, right? But this is the ridiculous nature of this religious proposition that I find. That's just hilarious. So no, just because somebody wrote a book a long time ago doesn't really mean a lot to me personally. Um, Agnostic, yeah. Uh, okay. Polygamy is disgusting. Well, I mean, depends on how you view it. I mean, polygamy was in the Bible. Polygamy was in all world religions. Um, you know, depends. So I mean, if you look at like how our species was biologically wired, maybe I mean might be the kind of way that we were wired biologically, to be honest with you. I mean, you look at all of our modern, and this is not really religious, but in discussion, but you look at how all of our closest ancestral kin on the evolutionary time tree are. Most of them are in some type of like polygynous type setups. You'll have like one male and a bunch of females, or whatever, and you see this like great apes and lions and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, but I tend to agree. One of my problems I have with religion is that it's almost like people can't be honest. People are unable to be honest about what they really want in their lives. Maybe somebody wants to have multiple wives, right? But instead of just being honest about that, they would rather just be like, oh, let me just either create or use this religion and say, well, God is telling me to do this. But this isn't just limited to this. This is limited to all kinds of stuff. People want to justify what they want to do, right? So instead of just being honest about what they want, they would rather use religion as a cover for that. And that's one of the other problems I have with a lot of religious leaders. The truth is, a lot of them have ulterior motives. They want to accomplish certain things. And instead of just saying that and say, hey, we want to get this project done, we want to do this, I want to have this, and this in my life. Maybe somebody wants to have multiple husbands or multiple wives, whatever. Instead of just being honest about that, they would rather say, well, God is telling me I need to do this. And I see it as a smokescreen. And a lot of times, let's be real here. Um, Let's see. Let me give that a big L real quick. So I'm gonna give that the buzzer. So this is going for all the going out for all those people who are using religion for smoke. And that this is the other problem too with a lot of religious people. One of my problems has always been like people who use religion when it's convenient for them, but aren't willing to use it when it's not. Right. So like where are the people at who just stand who embrace their religion even when it's hard for them? I feel like a lot of people use it because it gives them a leg up in society. It gives them the ability to weaponize their religion for their particular belief structure, you know. But yeah, so okay, so I'm not really controlling the content. Maybe I'll have to do one of these get a moderator and stuff like that. I got to figure all that stuff out. So um yeah, Agnostic Thea says hell was invented by the Catholics. Um I kind of agree with that. Um so yeah, I mean, but that's also a little that's a little the way people say that is also a little sneaky handed. And here's what I mean is when you say hell, yes, the idea of a hell with fire and torment, maybe that's more or less more like Catholic created, because Old Testament Jews don't buy into the idea of hell. Old Testament Jews actually, from what I know, the ones I know don't subscribe to the idea of there being a literal hell. Um, but in Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons tend to play this game too. If you ask them about the afterlife, they're going to say things like, well, basically like they're going to try and make it sound like there is no hell, right? Oh yeah, there's no hell. We don't believe in hell. Everybody kind of has a process for like redemption and perfection. But hell is a kind of a loosely defined term because, like in the case of Mormons, there is a position in which in Mormonism, if you don't go through your corrective phase properly, you don't necessarily go to a hell with fire, but you can just basically be turned off, essentially. Well, that's hell is a pseudonym for pain or torture. And I would say being killed and being terminated is the ultimate pain and torture. Hell with fire is not nice either. But it's kind of a cop out. This is still a form of hell. Let's be real here. So every religion has some form of hell. While it may not be fire and brimstone, it might be soul death. It might be getting put into a lesser species or animal, or a lesser spot in life where you're going to experience more pain and misery. Every religion has their own form of hell. Um, let's see here. People just making stuff up. People who have studied the books know that only Quran is 100% true because even a kid can read and notice the Bible was changed like other books. Well, I mean, this is a classic case of the no true Scotsman's fallacy. If you haven't heard that fallacy, look it up. It's basically this idea of like you would say like no true Scotsman would do X, Y, and Z, right? So let's just say no true Scotsman would litter, right? And so I might say to you, okay, but here's some video proof right here. This guy is a Scottish man. He's littering. Then you would just say, well, he's obviously not a true Scotsman because a true Scotsman would never litter. Well, that's what's happening here too with this whole idea of the people who have studied it find that it's 100% true. Because I know people who have studied the Quran who would disagree with you, who would say no, it's 100% true. I know people who have studied the Quran, but then you would just turn around and say, well, they obviously haven't truly studied it, right? So, and once again, this is where religion to me does the greatest harm is it stills your ability to empathize with other people. It stills your ability to recognize that other people have a different experience than you, right? For you, the Quran is 100% true, and anybody who disagrees with you is obviously mistaken and haven't actually read it. And it doesn't matter. They might even be a PhD in studying the Quran. They might have decades upon 30, 40 years studying the Quran and disagree with you, but it's never going to be good enough for you because in your mind, you've already decided that it's 100% true, right? And all it takes is for you to step outside of that and just put yourself in a position like mine. I see you standing here saying the Quran is 100% true. And I see a Christian standing here saying the Bible is 100% true. And as an independent observer, let's say I read both and I'm like, I don't agree. I don't see where either one of you are coming from. How does an independent observer come to your conclusion? And the truth is, you can't. You can't because you have to recognize the fact that it's that somebody else feels just as strongly about their position and it's in conflict with yours. So they both can't be true, but you both could be wrong. And that's more than likely you both are wrong. I know just if you run the numbers, just statistically speaking, you probably both are wrong. You both have picked the wrong religion. There are thousands upon thousands of religions that have existed in human history, most of which have come and gone and have disappeared from the face of the earth. Maybe the one true religion was one of those that came and gone, and maybe it's a lost religion. Maybe Christians and Muslims are both wrong. That could be the case. And I don't see any way for you to know whether or not it is the case outside of just you feel like yours is the truth, which in that case, you got Christians who feel the same way. And I don't see as an independent observer how I can distinguish the two. Um Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I'm gonna be logging off here in a few minutes, but want to thank you for tuning in for this live stream and all the awesome content and conversations. This is it's my first time using this platform to try to do this, and I think it's getting a little better. Yeah, so appreciate your time, appreciate the interaction. I know it's a very late slash early morning for many of us, but yeah. Thanks so much for your time. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I will be trying to do this at least once a week. So if you would like to present some topics of discussion, please put it in the comments section below. Send me a private message as well. Feel free to do that, and I'll be happy to get to you and try to use it for content for future videos. Thanks again. I hope you have a great evening, everybody, and a happy